Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are on the continent. I'm Aisha Hauser, and I have the privilege of serving as your Laredo president. This morning, I'm going to start with a couple of announcements before we begin. So from Catherine Childs, our fall conference chair, they write, with great apologies that this was not announced yesterday, there are two additional options for white identity groups: disability and neurodiversity and Jewish heritage. If people would like to switch into either of those for the remainder of the identity group sessions, direct message Catherine at kchilds.dre@gmail.com, and we'll put that in the chat. We're offering an opportunity to join colleagues for informal conversation during the meal break today at 12:30 Pacific, 3:30 Eastern, in our general session Zoom A room. That's this one. So MemberClicks is being very wonky. MemberClicks is the platform that the Laredo website uses, and not everyone has been receiving emails. Apologies for that. Please, if you have not been receiving emails daily, sometimes more than once a day, please email admin@laredo.org, and that is Avianca, our Director of Administration and Finance, and she will make sure that you get emails. I would suggest also making sure you check the email that you registered with, because that's also been happening, is folks registered with one email and maybe they're using a different one. I know I have several emails. Thank you to Sam Wilson. My understanding is it was a fun evening last night on the game night or fun night for fall conference. So thank you to everyone who showed up, and thank you for Sam. And tonight is crafts and chats, and tomorrow is a Laredo karaoke dance party. Yay. So let us arrive, and I will offer a reading from the Reverend Teresa Inez Soto, who led us in, it was part of our beautiful worship yesterday. This is from their book, Spilling the Light, and honestly, it is a must-have. If you do not have this book, I suggest getting it. And the Laredo Books, the UUA bookstore is offering free delivery for those who order during fall conference, and there is a special code, and I don't want to give the wrong one, so we'll also put that in the chat. So you can order a bunch of these. Everything is still on fire. Everything is still on fire despite your best efforts, in addition to living. It is clear that, fire or not, you must level up to what it means to thrive. Right now, that means wrestling with the truth in the fact that everything is not all your fault. I'm sorry that everything is still on fire. Once hate catches the winds of not my problem blow, and the blaze is hard to stop. But hard is not impossible. Not yet is different than never. You in community have an answer. You have a response to systems of power and control and to the cost of suffering. You and your community together are the answer. You are not only a people of flame, but also a people of cold, clear truth. You know both where you fall short and where you flourish, and where you still reach. Everything is still on fire, but all is not lost. You remain more nimble than steadfast, more unshakable than swayed by the latest rage. You are here to put out the ravenous flames and heal the world. Enough is enough. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be. So I have the honor and privilege of introducing Anna Bethay, who will be presenting the 2020 Angus McLean Award winner. Anna Bethay is the UUA Lifespan Faith Engagement Director, in the role less than a year. Anna empowers people to find liberation and make meaning in their lives. Anna has a background in social work and served as Director of Religious Exploration at the UU Church of Tallahassee in Florida, and also worked as the UUA Outreach Specialist before their current role in the Lifespan Faith Engagement Office. Anna believes in the power of curiosity and respectful mischief. Amen, Anna, in helping humanity get over itself and evolve. Amen. And with that, Anna Bethay.
Hey, y'all. So good to be with you. We usually give this award at our annual General Assembly in June, but due to a lot of circumstances, y'all know a lot has happened. We weren't able to do that this year. And we're making this presentation today with you all as our collegial witnesses. And I wrote this back in May, so some things may have changed. I've tried to update it, but Christina or anyone else, please correct me if any of this has changed. So, in a time of pandemic and a time in which centuries-long abuses are crying out to be healed and made whole, we as religious educators are called to reinvent yet again and teach new models of caring for each other. That's why it delights me to honor Cristina Rivera with this award for excellence in religious education. She has time and again called Unitarian Universalists to practice our faith in ways that tangibly affirm and promote the lives of those which the dominant society still will not. And Chris has done this in the face of threats aimed at both herself and her children. She continued her life-saving calling to religious education ministry while having to balance the safety of her children and her calling to liberation. While the costs of this tenacity have been high with lost employment, lost health, lost friends and colleagues, she has never lost the center of her calling to Unitarian Universalism's foundational tenet of liberatory faith. Indeed, she preaches, it is this faith that she hopes will one day be at the center of freedom, not only for her own children, but for all our children. Now, let me tell you a little bit of all the locations of Christina's ministry. Not all of them, I'm sure, but at least the ones we know of. Christina was dedicated in her stewardship of local congregational roles as the Director of Religious Education at the UU Fellowship of Waynesboro, Virginia, and the Director of Administration and Finance at the then TJ Memorial Church, UU in Charlottesville, Virginia. Alongside Kenny Wiley and Aisha Hauser, Christina was one of the founding religious educators of color who created the unprecedented global UU white supremacy teach-in. Building on that success, she then founded the UU Teach-In's Religious Professionals of Color Support Fund, which some of you have heard about, recognizing that religious professionals of color have specific needs, and moving resources to meet those needs is the fund's mission and purpose. To date, the fund has distributed over $5,000 to religious professionals of color. With an extraordinary depth of wisdom and skill, Christina continues to coach congregations and other organizations through her consulting group called To Justice. And Christina is a tireless advocate for UU youth, religious educators, and shared ministry. She shared that energy in spaces from regional gatherings to General Assembly workshops and webinars and trainings. And she is the first religious educator and the first Boricua Chicana religious professional to serve on our UUA board, first as trustee, then as financial secretary, and finally as secretary of the association. During her service, she was instrumental in bringing about an ethos of shared ministry and restoring board voting status and expanding to 2 youth observers, now youth trustees. Christina elevates the entire profession of religious education through her service as secretary of the board of Loretta, and prior to that was part of the successful lobby for religious educators to have GA delegate voting status similar to their ordained clergy colleagues. Christina was the organizing UU presence during the Summer of Hate in Charlottesville 2017. She served as an anchor of connection to local community and faith organizers to counter-protest white supremacists masquerading as political victims. Christina continues to work for justice in her local community during the COVID pandemic. Working together with mutual aid and community organizers, she's helped to raise and distribute over $3 million for those most impacted by COVID in Charlottesville community. Christina recognizes and actively supports the importance of Black UU theology and serves on the advisory team for Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism. And Christina is the 2019 recipient of the Melvin Hoover Beloved Community Award for outstanding service to communities of color in Unitarian Universalism, given by DRUM, the Diverse Revolutionary, UU Multicultural Ministries. And now, as many of you know, Christina is a part of the new lead ministry team at the Church of the Larger Fellowship. One of her collaborative ministries has been as a co-host of the View talk show, one of my enduring sources of religious education. Finally, Christina, your level of commitment to this field and to this faith are truly awe-inspiring. And it's my pleasure, my great pleasure, to present the McLean Award to you on behalf of the Unitarian Universalist Association, the St. Lawrence Theological School alumni, and the McLean Award Committee. Do you have some words for us, Christina?
Wow, that was just so amazing, Anna. Thank you. I'm like, man, I did a lot.
You did a lot.
It made me think of when Drum presented the Mel Hoover Award to me. They didn't tell me beforehand that I was getting it, and I was sitting there eating my, they present it during the dinner, and I was sitting there eating my dinner, and they were describing this person. I'm like, God, I wonder who's getting it today, because I really want to know, because that sounds like a really fabulous person. And then it was me, and I'm like, I'm in mid-bite, and I'm getting this award from, oh my God. So I just, it's really humbling and really affirming. And, I have to bring the ancestors into the room with us. Soy Cristina de Ana Rivera Silva de Ramirez. Soy la hija de Dolores, la nieta de Socorro y Guadalupe, y la bisnieta de Bartola. And I give you all the names of my matrilineal lineage because without those women, and really without all of my ancestors, I wouldn't be here with you today, right? And I certainly wouldn't be the strong Chicana Boricua woman that I am today without their lived example of how to thrive, not just survive, but thrive in a world that really does not want to see Black and brown women survive and thrive. So I give it up for them. I also need to bring into the room, the religious educators who aren't here with us, not because they are with the ancestors, but because we were not able to draw the circle wide enough and keep them in the room with us. So I think about Razik Brown and Kenny Wiley and Yvette Salinas and Iris de la Paz, who are just, the men, just some of the most recent among many who have not been able to stay in this faith. And I bring them into the room with us because we need to remember that we're not all here. We're not all here. And it diminishes us all when we're not all here. I have to admit, I had hesitations. Anna will tell you that when she gave me the news that I had been selected, I was surprised. I was hesitant. I was hesitant to accept it. This award comes from the Unitarian Universalist Association, which I've served. But what does it mean to accept an award from an organization that has actively done harm to me and loved ones without apology? From an organization whose highest leaders set a tone of treatment of me, which led to death threats, stalking and threats against my children, loss of wages, loss of employability. What does it mean to say yes to that? Just yesterday, we were asked a question about, what brings you joy right now? And one of my answers is employment. Like I'm employed after a year of not having been employed. No congregation would interview me. Ones that would interview me wanted to know how they were going to, quote unquote, handle my active online presence. I couldn't get an administrator job. I couldn't get a religious educator job. It was hard. It has been hard. Um, and so to go through that without even an apology from that organization and yet accept an award from that organization is hard. We teach in religious education that apology is the first step of restoration of relationship. And I've yet to receive that. And more to the point, religious educators have yet to receive that. We were called hysterical and unqualified to lead by those in the highest positions at the UUA. And we took it and we said it's not right. And we turned around and created the most successful grassroots campaign, the UU White Supremacy Teach-In. But those are still questions that I don't have a perfect answer to about, what does it mean to say thank you to that? And I guess what I do have the answer to is love. I love Unitarian Universalism, even when sometimes I dislike the institutions. I love our colleagues who put their life and spirit on the line daily in an ongoing battle for our mutual and collective liberation. I love that we can, in our most difficult moments, recognize that we have to draw the circle wider, that nobody is outside of that love, but that doesn't mean that they're not outside of responsibility and accountability. And sometimes people have to be separated from that group in order for that group to move on. So I think about the work of religious educators. I think about the work of the Commission on Institutional Change, which has done a remarkable feat of religious education. That's really what I see their purpose and their mission. I was one of the creators of the Commission on Institutional Change. I was one of the people who said, we have to have accountability within Unitarian Universalism if we are to move forward. And it wasn't just, I didn't just come to that like, oh, wow, we need to do that. It's because we've had decades of UUs of color demanding accountability within Unitarian Universalism and within the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations. That time and that place finally came to be a time when we could come together and say, yes, we need to do this. It's my deepest fear that this report is going to sit on a shelf, that we're going to give it a lot of airtime and airplay right now, and probably maybe in the next coming year, but that we will not return to it over and over again for the work that is ahead of us. And so, I thought a lot about what I could say to you all today about the history of religious education, or, women of color's place within religious education, or why it's so significant that, religious educators are now leading as the senior ministry team of the largest UU congregation. But I think that the biggest thing that I need to say to you all is that it's our responsibility as religious educators to carry this work forward. No one is going to do it for us. We've seen that over and over again. Over and over again, we've seen that it's religious educators that are willing to go into those spaces where we can say, we don't know, let's learn together, let's do this together. That we are humble enough to say, you know what, I don't know how to do this. Can somebody please help me learn how to do this and do it well? Who can say, I'm sorry when we hurt one another. That's one of the most beautiful things that I love about our groups is the ability to reach out to each other when we've fucked up and just done it wrong, right? Because that's going to happen. That has to be part of this process, us doing it wrong before we get to doing it all right. And if we are so afraid and terrified of each other doing it wrong, it's just not going to happen. I've done it wrong. Aisha's done it wrong. Like there's a million people on this screen. Everybody's done it wrong at one point in time or another. It's not the point. It's not the point. The point is that we come back to try and do it right. So it's up to us. I know that's kind of crappy sometimes. We wish the rest of our colleagues, our ministerial, our ordained clergy colleagues, some of which are here today, thank you. Our music colleagues, our administrative colleagues, our membership colleagues, all of our colleagues. It's up to all of us, but I got to tell it real, religious educators, it is really in our court. Our time is now. We need you. We need you. We have this particular time when people are looking to us for leadership. We showed leadership before, but right now people are looking to us for leadership. And I know we're tired. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying don't take self-care. You need that. Please do it. Religious professionals of color, if you need it, hit me up. We'll get you some dollars to do it. But it's really, really important that we recognize this as our work, just as much as our work is to make sure that we have, caregivers for kids on Sunday and curricula and all of those kinds of things. Mutual collective liberation is our work as UU religious educators. Please don't forget that. Don't forget it this week. Don't forget it next week, next year, the year after that. And if you need help in that work, there is a huge constellation of people who are willing to help you with that. Don't feel like you have to do it on your own. We're here for you. Lastly, I would say I wouldn't be here without the love and support of Andreas, Miguel, my husband, Chris. Oh God, I probably shouldn't start naming people, but I'm going to name some people. Come on, let's do it with me. Let's see, Leah Derlin-Jones, Anna Lee, Leslie Mack, Lena, Takia, Marisol, Reverend Martha, Tim, Adina, Atina, Wick, Michael, and most of all, Aisha Hauser. Many people mistakenly think that Aisha and I have been friends forever. But in truth, we barely knew each other in the spring of 2017. People they're like, what? I'm like, we barely knew each other. Like we knew each other through other people. And we came together in a time of mutual respect and that we just didn't give a shit anymore. We weren't going to take it. We were just going to tell the fucking truth, right? And that's really what it took to come to this time. And we've paid a price. Don't get me wrong. We have paid a price. We've paid a price and there's been pain, but we've been able to see that blossom into resilience and resistance and the beauty of this moment. And I just want to thank you all because I'm taking this award from you all. And with the love that I know is behind it, the love of Unitarian Universalism and our faith that I know is behind it. So lead on, religious educators. We need you now more than ever. I love you all. I'm going to scroll through your faces real quick because I'm the next presenter. So nobody can do anything until I finish. There's Allison, there's Sheila, there's Indigo, Margaret, Stacy, Emily, Mandy, Barbara, Megan, Lauren, Derek. Oh my God, there's so many pages of y'all. Richard, Anissa, Angela, Corey, Sunshine, Rose, flailing Clermont arms from Jude. Sunshine. I love it. Amy Brock, hi. I cannot wait until we are all together. Greg, Jessica, Elizabeth Ann, I cannot wait until we are all together again. It's going to Michael Krupler and Chris Johns. We have all got to be together again one day, right? It's coming. I know it's coming. I have faith that I'm going to hear Aisha scream from the other side of the convention center, Chris! Chris! I know it's coming. Well, I have the distinct joy and honor to introduce to you our next two presenters, Gaia Brown and Gail Forsyth Vale. Gaia is a credentialed religious educator, master level, lives in Reno, Nevada, and she's been a UU religious educator since 1975. I'm not even going to tell you that I was 5 years old. Oh, I think I just did. And joined Loretta in 1994. What took her so long? That question is answered in her upcoming book, Raising Our Profession, A History of the Liberal Religious Educators Association's Pursuit of Professional Standards and Credentialing. I can't wait for it. Gaia is also the author of the Superheroes Curricula, UU Superheroes and Bible People, and the co-author of Treasure Hunting and Compass Points. She co-authored numerous revisions of Renaissance module. Thank you for that work. In the curriculum and administrative areas, and also served on the Loretta board from 1999 through 2004. Gail is a credentialed religious educator, master level, and author or developmental editor of several UU history curricula and resources. She's been a proud member of Loretta since 1990. She's served congregations for 22 years before joining the UUA staff, and was the 2007 recipient of the Angus MacLean Award for Excellence in Religious Education. Wah, wah. Before retiring in 2020. And I'm just going to put, they're retiring in air quotes because, like, we all know Gail is still doing all the things, right? She served as interim director of the UUA's Association Lifespan Faith Engagement Office. She lives in Georgetown, Massachusetts with her spouse, Stephen, and together they have 3 adult children and 2 adult grandchildren, with 2 more on the way. I'm going to assume those 2 more are 2 more grandchildren on the way. And we're just so delighted to have both of them here to talk with us about raising our profession, the power of collaboration. And this is the saga of how religious educators, beginning at the margins of Unitarian Universalism, has used the power of collaboration to raise themselves as professionals and agents of change in our faith movement. I can't wait. Thank you so much. Take it away.
Okay, so Christina just introduced us. Thank you for that. And we're going to talk about a project that's been a labor of love that Gaia has worked on for, I don't know how many years at this point, Gaia, but I got involved in it recently. 7 years. I got involved in it after I retired to help out bring the manuscript to publication, which we hope will be soon. This is a story of how lay religious educators, once expected to guide faith development for children and youth with little support, little money, and not much respect, found a calling. It's a story of a paradigm shift, a major change, not just in religious education, but in the way Unitarian Universalists understand faith development programs and those who lead them. This is the saga of how we came to raise ourselves as religious professionals. And we're going to start with a story. The book, when it's published, is full of stories. So we're going to start with a story that Gaia has. And we're going to ask you to hold your questions. We've got about 9 topics we're going to talk about, and I'm going to put those things in the chat as we get to them. And if you could hold your questions, we're going to save some time at the end for Q&A. So, all right. Let's start with your story, Gaia.
Well, actually, this first story, I'm not seeing myself lit up, so I'm assuming are people hearing me? Hearing me okay? Okay.
Yes.
But this story actually isn't in the book, but it happened, it's a Loretta story because it was at Professional Days, probably around 1999 or so. And we were in Salt Lake City, professional days, and we had somebody coming from the UUA. He was a person who worked with district compensation consultants. And he introduced himself to us, and he said his name was Ron Green, and we could remember his name. Green was the color of money. And he knew that even though as religious educators, we didn't earn much money, we certainly had a lot of respect from people. And the room was so quiet, and he'd been kind of trying to warm us up, and he's seeing these puzzled looks. And we're sitting there thinking, he is making a joke at our expense. And he says, wait, do you mean to tell me that you don't get a lot of respect? And then, you know, like, who in the room feels they don't get a lot of respect? Like, every hand went up. So that was certainly a learning experience for him of the status of religious educators back at the turn of the century, the turn of this century. Another story is a story that was written, so you got this one, The Semi-Miraculous Odyssey of Candide Malchance. This was sent to you, I hope, ahead of time. And this was written, the original was written by Voltaire, who was a French philosopher, and he wrote this in the mid-1700s as kind of a pushback against the Enlightenment, which was saying that everything was the best. This was the best of all possible worlds, and the best of everything happened in this best of all possible worlds. And Candide, the hero of the story, just goes through the world with one calamity after another befalling him, and just keeps his optimism. So this was written by the woman who at the time was the head of religious education professional development at the UUA, Jean Ellen Ryan. 20 years ago, I was looking for a career where being nice and friendly, yet bright and capable, somewhat tenderhearted, and an unbridled optimist to boot were assets, not liabilities. I was only visiting the local UU church in my town when, to my surprise, on my third visit, the minister took me aside and offered me my first job as a director of religious education. I learned later they just couldn't find anyone else to do it at the time, but I certainly felt special, empowered by the role and recipient of instant credibility with some members of the congregation. I was now the expert that others looked to for leadership and curriculum planning and refreshments for the children. I was so excited, I hardly thought about the fact that I really didn't know anything about religious education. Go.
Well, I began in 1986, and at the time Loretta was a pretty exclusive club, and you had to have 3 years of paid professional experience and 5 Renaissance modules before you were allowed into Loretta, and that was a loosening over the earlier standards for Loretta. So I do remember in 1990 it was a huge deal to be able to get into Loretta. And there had been a feeling about Loretta earlier. I think, Gaia, you had a story about being with your colleagues and how Loretta felt far away and pretty exclusive in the early days. So you're muted, I think.
Yes, somehow or another, religious educators found each other. And in New Jersey, we met monthly. And there were maybe 8 of us all together, and 6 would show up on any one month, often with children in tow. And we had no respect from our congregations, from our ministers generally. And we knew that there were other religious educators around the country that had a special group, and that we were not allowed to be part of that group. And we were told, we heard the reason we were not allowed to be part of this group of religious educators was because we would dilute the programming that they had with our presence. So that was how people like myself were viewed by Loretta back in the 1970s and 1980s. Go.
Hi. We're using go so that because we're not looking at each other, we're far apart here. So how did the Renaissance program come to be, and what effect did it have on our understanding of ourselves as religious professionals? So I'm going to talk a little bit about how it came to be, and then Gaia's got a story about what that felt like in the early days. So part-time religious educators were largely untrained, and the overwhelming majority of those tapped to lead RE programs were part-time, and they were lay people. So there was Loretta over there, which had people who had full-time jobs and professional degrees in religious education. And then there were the 97 or whatever, how many percent of religious educators and congregations who were part-time, and they were lay people. The only trainings that existed were for teachers, and they were around particular curricula, but there was nothing that even pointed lay people to how they might go about leading an RE program. Gene Navius was the RE department director at the UUA in those days, and he was really concerned about the lack of training. I know when I went through lots of papers when we were moving out of 41 and over to 24 Farnsworth, that I found memos from Gene that I did pack up and send off to Meadville Lombard, but with serious concerns about this issue then. So with others, he developed a vision for what became the Renaissance program. And in 1984, Ann Fields arrived at the UUA with responsibility for a bunch of things, but one of them was the development of the Renaissance program. And it began with the still familiar 15-hour training and there were 6 of them at the beginning: curriculum, teacher training, administration, UU identity, worship, and philosophy. I have to write them down to remember what they were. And they became the only available training for lay religious educators. That was it. That's what there was. But they had a model of leadership that made a huge, huge difference. Because I'm going to pass it over to you, Gaia. Talk about the model of leadership, because you talked about how that made a huge difference in your understanding of yourself as a professional. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
All right. So what would happen is that people like Ann Fields, and Ann Fields is the person who I would hold up as my mentor, my most important mentor among many. She and others of her glorious ilk would come and lead the modules. And then once you had taken the module, you would be asked to co-lead with someone like Barbara Marshman or Ann Fields or these illustrious people. And so I had the opportunity to co-lead the curriculum module. And that was the first one I got involved with and I co-led it with Ann. And so that's 1984, 1985. 1986, I'm living in Newark, New Jersey, or near Newark, New Jersey, and I get on a plane. The UUA has me get on a plane and sends me to California to lead a Renaissance module. I can't tell you what that did for me to be viewed that way. It was life-changing for me. Go.
Trying to put the questions in the chat box to let you know where we're moving in our process. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the sources of power upon which religious educators relied as they persisted year over year in search for respect. I know that Gaia has talked about reading everything she could find, but not having anybody to guide her, and finding Sophia Faz stuff on her shelf and reading it. But there were sources of power that weren't identified as such in those days, but in retrospect were the sources of power which religious educators relied on as they moved into understanding themselves as professionals. One was their position in the congregation. Our lay leaders in congregations often begin as RE volunteers. So religious educators, even if the system devalues them, have a tremendous amount of power because they're often the ones that are often the entry point for lay leadership. Religious educators have an influence on families and parents and children both, and on youth. Religious educators also found power in a collaborative, supportive culture that religious educators created and maintained when they were together. There are some downsides to that culture, but there are tremendous upsides in that it was very much of a sharing culture. I've got this idea, I'm willing to share it with you. So the culture also was accepting of people with different kinds of educational and professional backgrounds, so that the currency in religious education in those days was really the sharing of ideas and kind of a we're all in this together kind of culture. And there was power in that. It was a culture of learning, a culture of experimentation, a culture that wasn't afraid to ask questions or to try new things. Loretta was early in the establishment of an anti-racism team, which later became the integrity team. There was, Loretta was the first to commission an anti-racism audit. Loretta was the first welcoming organization. The Loretta Integrity Team initiated the rise in body or spirit language that is used in many, many congregations now. And there was some open conversation in Loretta over the years about competing covenants. How do we deal with being financially accessible in our conferences while still being physically accessible? Um, so there was a lot of honest conversation that went on in Loretta. So in those things, in the collaboration, in the honest conversations, in the longing for to lift ourselves up as professionals, there was power, although, as I said, we would not have named it that way, I don't think, early on, but looking back, that's where it was. So I am going to ask Gaia, if you want to reflect on that at all, go ahead, and then you talk about some of the limitations and the challenges that we faced also in the early days.
Okay, the limitations. Well, gee, money was a big one. And the the first year that I was a religious educator in 1975, I earned $900. I was working half time. I didn't earn as much as on an hourly basis as I paid my 13-year-old babysitter. So money was a big deal. And what that did, it was really expected that religious educators were going to be people who were supported by somebody else. They were married, that they had a husband, that the husband had a good paying job, and that therefore they could essentially, for a small stipend, be the religious educator. They were never going to be a breadwinner. Well, this, of course, took a lot of people out of the profession, including myself. When I got divorced, I couldn't afford to be a religious educator. I had 6 years I wasn't in the profession. I was working for a real job. So I think that's a lot of it was that. And of course, it meant too that we were middle class. It was just it was really going to give you a slice of white bread, middle class white bread, that could be in the profession of religious education. Oh, this is where I wanted to read. I mentioned Jean Ellen Ryan before. This is from her Essex Conversation. I hope most of you are acquainted with that book. She said in her essay in Essex Conversations, association-wide, this is 1999 about that she is writing this, association-wide, we have never fully embraced the notion of verifiable professionals qualified to carry the burden of ministry to children, youth, and families for every congregation. I state this as an observable fact, not an opinion. Remember, she's head of all this at the UUA right then. We offer a variety of explanations for this fact. We can't afford it. Our congregations are too small. Institutionally, we remain too attached to 19th century notions of woman as natural nurturer, or the 1950 notions of available young mothers who gladly turn to this work to get out of the house and earn pin money. Members of an oppressed, marginalized group, such as religious educators, who are operating in a system that is unaware of its oppression, may not be best suited to lead the transformative way. My point is that inadequate views of religious education leadership limit all that is possible, including progress on our goals for anti-racism and healthy understanding of human sexuality. So she's calling out back then that we need religious educators to be doing this work, but the churches and the UUA are the oppressors and really unaware that they are oppressors. And what has been shown of late, since maybe about 2017, maybe started earlier, is that the oppressed are able to lead the way.
Okay.
So,
Thanks. I'd like to and to invite you to talk a little bit about the pressure that came from the UUA, from the UUMA, and from within UU culture for religious educators who view themselves as professionals to go to seminary and seek ordination. The tremendous pressure that if you're really serious about this, you will go to seminary. Yeah, I'll just let you talk about that a little bit.
all
You
right.
called it anti-clerical bias, I think, is a clerical
I call
bias.
it anti-clerical. Yeah. Well, it was a clerical bias. They wanted you to be clerical. Oh, sorry. We don't even answer the phone. I live in a contested state and we're approaching an election. So anyhow, there was a lot of people expected, you know, you're a religious educator, you're nothing, you're a volunteer. Now you're a religious educator. And of course you want to be up here, which is a minister. And that is just the way I think the UUA's mindset. It was a mindset of people in congregations, and particularly also in the 80s, late 80s, mid to late 80s, as the women's movement got so strong, women really were seeking their power by going into ministry. So there was there were good reasons for women to be doing this. But also it's just, again, the lack of respect. And what you heard, if you were like me, a good religious educator, you had people in your congregation going, well, you're such a great religious educator. Why aren't you a minister? Just could not see that you wouldn't want to be aspiring to be a minister. It was the thing to be.
So a lot of things began to happen, and we don't have time to go into all of the things that happened. We're going to talk about the early development of professional standards and what led to the RE credentialing program. But I at this point want to stop and talk about the Shelter Rock grant and how it came about. I'm going to talk about what it was, and like I talk about what it meant. And I'll put that question later because I can't type and talk at the same time. But in March 1998, a key thing happened. 1998 was kind of a key pivotal year in a lot of our history. But in 1998, after 3 years of negotiations, it really was the capstone project of Norma Veridan's professional life. She shepherded a process that led to an $800,000 grant that Loretta received from the congregation at Shelter Rock. And it was to provide incentive funding for congregations that were committed to bringing the salaries of their religious educators up to the guidelines indicated in to sustain the living tradition from the UUA Compensation Committee. So this really, congregations could apply for grants of up to $5,000 for up to 3 years, but they had a bunch of things they had to do as part of the grants. They needed a covenant with their religious educators, so they needed to talk about goals, and they needed to talk about supporting their religious educators, paying their Loretta memberships. They needed to talk about benefits. They needed to be involved in welcoming congregation programs and in anti-racism programs. So there were a whole lot of conditions attached to this money, which were aimed at pushing congregations in a lot of culture change directions. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Guy, and let you talk about what that all meant.
Well, one thing it meant was that congregations had to sit down with their religious educators and find out what the religious educator did. Congregations found out that religious educators actually had a body of knowledge and skills that they acquired one way or the other, but that they needed to do the job. It was like, oh, I went to Sunday school. Shouldn't be hard for somebody to run a program like that. They had no idea. So the learning that happened in the congregations did a tremendous amount to help religious educators get some respect. It helped congregations realize that they had a responsibility to their religious educator. It wasn't just the religious educator had a responsibility to them, but that they had to be paying for their religious educator to be a member of Loretta, for instance, to be part of their professional organization. So it was it opened up a lot of conversation. There was even a second grant. There was a total of over $1 million. And I was doing the math, and at least 70 congregations got these awards, which changed what was possible for a religious educator. Because if it was paying a living wage, then you could have a broader type of person, more people who could enter this profession. So change the profession in that way. I think go.
So simultaneously to all of that negotiation happening around the Shelter Rock grant, there was also some serious work being done in Loretta about the development of professional standards. There was a professional standards task force. It's a long and complex story, which we're only previewing or touching on little pieces of here. But I thought we just kind of go into one section of that story, which is that the Loretta Professional Standards Task Force was meeting at Pickett and Elliott House, which belonged to the UUA. And Gaia, why don't you tell the story about what happened when that met and sort of the change in attitude? Because for a long time, the UUA said, here's Renaissance, and we don't want to be involved in the rest of it. This is Loretta's problem. And just talk about it a little bit, how it changed from there.
Well, actually, yes. We were told by Cynthia Breen, who was then head of religious education at the UUA, just sort of, UUA has done credentialing before. We're not going to do it again. Loretta, you go and do it. So we went and we did it. And we were very transparent about what we were, I mean, we went ahead and did some planning, but we were transparent about what we were doing. And about 15 months later, having been told, Loretta, you are going to do whatever you want to do for standards, you do it, we're not involved. I'm not quite sure how it happened. Sometimes it's like Hanukkah, the candles burned for all those nights. A great miracle happened here. The UUA had a change of heart and decided it wanted to be involved. Well, now there was kind of a collision because the UUA did sort of had a program which Gail was part of and actually a successful part of called The Landscape. And it had that program that had been going along, but with very few people participating in it. And it said, well, now I can't get into, you have to read the book because it was so confusing of all of a sudden the UUA changing its story, but they said, we don't want you to do credentialing. We're going to do the credentialing. But the happy part of that was that we came together, the UUA and the Professional Standards Task Force, and together put together what became the credentialing program, uh, to everyone's success. I think that's it. You got to read the book, guys. To know what's
Yes,
going on.
you'll have to find out about what this has to do with flying pigs, but it does have to do with flying when pigs flew. That was the metaphor that was used. This would not happen. This would happen when pigs flew. The Religious Education Credentialing Committee, of which I was a part, the founding committee, met for the first time in October of 2003. It was chaired by Liz Jones. The other members besides myself were Sue McGovern, Betty Jo Middleton, Catherine Warrior, David Hubner, and Beth Williams were ex officio. And our startup was led by Paula Cole Jones and Janice Marie Johnson. So our idea from the beginning of the credentialing program was that that anti-oppression was to be built in, that we didn't want to build a structure that had oppression built into it. We were a little naive in thinking that we could do this in the context of a UU culture, because we also had the pressure of having to come up with credentialing standards that would be seen as rigorous by the UU culture as a whole. So the constant push and pull about how to make these standards rigorous, and also to have what we called equivalencies to honor non-traditional, non-academic ways of acquiring skills. And so the committee had to do all this, figure this all out, and start seeing candidates less than 6 months later. It was just ridiculous, actually. We met in October for 4 or 5 days, and then in February we saw our first 3 candidates, who were Gaia and Helen Bishop and Michelle Richards, were the first 3 people that we saw in February. So we were trying to make decisions quickly and also deliberately. If you can do those both at the same time, we worked so hard. And we made mistakes, and we did some, but we also knew that we were going to have to be correcting things as we went, that we were building it as we were using it. And so I think we went into that with that religious educator idea, that it's okay if what we build needs to be amended or fixed or whatever. So that's the way it was in the early days of the Religious Education Credentialing Committee. And Gaia, you wanted to speak to the early days of the Committee on Mentoring, which was the part that Loretta held. UUA had the Credentialing Committee and Loretta held the mentoring.
Well, the mentoring, actually, when we went back, if you go back to the very, very, very beginning of, even before the Professional Standards Task Force was formed, there was the concept from Loretta that there has to be mentoring as part of the professional standards. And I think this was just a critical thing. And it's another indication of the way that we work collaboratively, and that we are there to help each other out, and always knowing that we need to be learning more. So we did have the mentoring committee. It was similar in some ways to the, on a much smaller scale, to the RECC, in that we had to start doing it before we knew what we were doing. It's been, though, the important thing, I think, was the sharing. And I wanted to here give a shout out, because originally there were, who was going to be a mentor? It was a lot of it was a ministers of religious education who came and mentored their lay colleagues, which was really, really wonderful. And a challenge that we had too, and was that we looked, there was no diversity in the mentors, because the pool of religious educators, remember, they're underpaid, they're white housewives, many of them. It was really hard, a struggle to be able to get diversity in our pool, but that's wonderfully changed. Go.
Thanks. So I think our last piece, really, because we want to allow a little bit of Q&A time, is this priceless piece, which I did not know about until I began talking with you about the conversation with Sarah Lambert that led pretty directly to your 7 years of work on this manuscript. And this, setting the scene, this is right after Peter Morales and Harlan Limpert had decided to combine ministry and faith development into one department, had demoted Judith Frediani, had religious education had lost its seat at the leadership council table, and Sarah Lammert was hired to lead this brand new consolidated 32-person staff group that really didn't trust each other very much. And so in you go, Gaia. Go for it. Tell your story.
Okay, first of all, I do believe Sarah is in the room with us. So Sarah, good morning. Sarah is a friend of mine as well as being a colleague. And so when she became, well, first of all, to back up, let me say in October of 2010, just shortly after Sarah had taken over this new department, Beth Williams, who'd been head of the credentialing program at the UUA, returned from a sabbatical to find out she did not have a job. And to reassure people, Sarah had asked Loretta's president at that time, Ann Bancroft, to send out a letter to all members of Loretta, ensuring them that she said, please be assured of the UUA staff's commitment to the continued success of this program. So that sounded okay. And I appreciate all that our religious educators contribute to transforming our faith and look forward to partnering with you in the days and years to come, said the letter. So I go in to talk to Sarah, and I just had made an appointment to go say, Sarah, I'm so delighted and wishing you the best in this new role. But when I went into her office, the first thing I said was, well, before I say anything else, I want to thank you for your commitment to the credentialing program. And her reply was, oh, well, I really don't know about the credentialing program. And I just went, oh my God, because I saw more than 10 years worth of work just going all down the drain. And she and I had a very heartfelt conversation about religious education credentialing, because at that time still, as far as UUA was concerned, really, there was this higher level that you should aim for, and that was ministry. And we had this conversation, and I will give you the short story that what my first year as a religious educator, in a training I went to, or meeting, I referred to myself as a director of religious education, a DRE. I'd been hired to be my congregation's DRE in 1975. But I got told in no uncertain terms that I had no right to call myself a DRE, because that was reserved for people who had been credentialed by the Unitarian Universalist Association to be a DRE. And it was probably the very most humiliating moment of my entire life. Although I wasn't called out personally, the people in the room knew who was being called out. So anyhow, I told that story to Sarah, and I said, you know, there are people who are called to be lay professionals as opposed to clerical professionals. And so we had a good conversation, and the program continued and continues to this day. Thank you, Sarah.
Yes, thank you. So I think we want to close the sort of presentation part of this by I wanted to read you this little piece from the President Susan Frederick Gray recognized Loretta as the recipient of the 2018 UUA Volunteer Service Award. And I just want you to hear what those words were, even if you've heard them before. Since 1955, Loretta has been committed to promoting professional standards in religious education. Loretta's partnership with the UUA to create a religious education credentialing program set a key standard for religious educators nationwide. And through the development of a common code of ethics, good offices, and continuing professional development resources and trainings, Loretta has continually invested in and supported the highest professional standards for religious educators. Loretta and its leaders have long charged our association to live and lead at the margins of our faith, from the diversity and inclusion team to focusing on the spiritual dimensions of the tough topics of race, human sexuality, death, and our relationship with money. From the initial conversations and leadership that created the About Your Sexuality and later the Our Whole Lives curricula, to commissioning their own anti-racism audit, to becoming the first welcoming organization, and most recently members of Loretta leading the call and developing curriculum resources and trainings for a white supremacy teach-in, in which over 700 congregations participated. Loretta has exemplified how courageous conversations create spaces where all are welcome. Throughout its history and in this moment, Loretta and its members have been bold and fearless in challenging our faith to be more inclusive and deal with the issues of the time with honesty and courage through an unwavering commitment to developmental learning and growth. So that's where we wanted to end our formal presentation and say there's a whole bunch of stuff we didn't tell you. It's in the book, but we do want to do a little bit of Q&A. I don't know what, how time is working, but are there questions that you have? We'll try to answer them. I think putting them in the chat is the best. The book is called Raising Our Profession and it has a subtitle. I wrote it down. Gaia spent many nights lying awake trying to figure out the right title for this book. And it really, because it picks up the story at the place. Loretta had another book called Giving Birth to Ourselves. And this really picks up the story at the end of that story. So this one is Raising Our Profession. Okay. So if there are no burning questions, I think we're going to pass it over to the next people and happy to answer questions. And I think,
Gail?
yes.
I have one question and I can't type fast enough, but I wonder, I just want to say to both of you, thank you so much first for all the work you've done for our profession. And I wonder, knowing you both to be people who have continually learned and grown, if you could go back, or what are the ways in which, considering how we have awakened as a profession, I think over the last couple of years, to the ways we've left behind Black, Indigenous, people of color within our profession. Like, is there anything you would have done differently early on? Like, I know you named that lens was there, but are there specific things that sort of have come to mind for you in our own discernment about ways that we can do better going forward as religious professionals?
I think yes. I think one of the downsides, thanks for the question, because I think one of the downsides of being collaborative and welcoming is that those kinds of circles can get clubby. That's one thing. And I think we also accepted not being compensated for a lot of things over a long period of time. We accepted poor to no compensation. The UUA used to put out a packet quarterly, which was full of things that were created and developed by religious educators for which there was no compensation offered. And so in some ways that that left us as kind of not doing what we should have done to advocate for professional standards, and also for inclusion of people who simply could not afford to do this for a pittance. So I think that that's one thing that I would go back and change, that it wasn't noble to do this for nothing, that it didn't serve us well. I don't know if that's a full answer to your question, but that's. There's one came in. I wonder, it says interim religious education ministry is a topic that is, it seems to me, following a similar path. Relatively few congregations and few leaders seem aware of it and the specialized training that is needed for it to be effective. I wonder what both of us, Gaia, you and me, might observe about what the next important steps are for all lay religious professionals to do as we look to the future and the need to follow through on building and supporting true collaborative ministries. That is huge. I'm not sure we can answer that in this moment. I think part of this is the work of this conference. To look at, here's where we've been, here are the things we've learned, here is the sources of our power, here are the places where we left things on the table, where we left it on the table and didn't power that we did not use or did not recognize, and the consequences to that are people left behind. Are I think that Loretta, in all of its good intentions, would get close to the issues that had to do with professional standing. And then there was almost being, it wasn't until Pat Ellenwood became the president of Loretta that there was this bold assertion of the right of lay religious educators to have professional standards and a professional pathway, and something objective, not just being brought in by somebody who kind of put their arm around your shoulder and brought you in. Does that answer your question, Kirsten?
Yeah, it does. I really like the power we leave on the table as an idea around this of, if it's good enough for some people, how we stop paying attention to how it's not good enough for everyone. And I think that's just, I'll hold on to that. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. And I think we should, the book is not ready yet. It needs to be copy edited and etc.
All right, welcome back, everyone. It is my privilege to get to introduce our next speakers, and welcoming from the UUA offices of Church and Staff Finance.
And it looks like, okay, Deanna, you are.
Sorry about that. From the UUA offices of Church Staff Finances, Jan Gardner and Richard Nugent are here to speak with us. The Office of Church Staff Finances help UU congregations to live into the principles of our faith through their employment relationships. So Jan and Richard have both been advocating for years for our professional well-being as religious professionals and educating us to influence the quality of our own livelihood. These are folks that you can go to find out answers to questions about fair compensation, about retirement, about benefits that you should be receiving as an employee in your congregation. And we're so happy to have you both here today. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Well, hello there. Thank you. It is fantastic to be here with so many Loretta members and friends, and to follow Gaia and Gail. Wow, what a perfect segue into the messages that we wanted to send. So really quick, I'm Jan Gartner. My title is Compensation and Staffing Practices Manager. I was a religious educator in 2 congregations. I served on district staff for a year. I was overseeing the credentialing program for religious educators when I first joined UUA staff in 2011. And along the way, I was also a mentor as well as a Loretta Good Officer. So I've seen professional struggles from many angles, and it's a privilege to continue helping to work on those. Richard, you want to say hi?
I do indeed. And I am Richard Nugent, he, his, him. And I'm in my 13th year with the UUA in this particular position with the Office of Church Staff Finances. And before that, I spent 11 years doing solely interim ministry to 7 congregations. Listening to the presentation, thank you so much, Gaia and Gail, to share a part of the story. Like so much, no one of us has a full picture of the past, as some of the comments have pointed out. it brought back some of the memories I've had through the years, as well as some of the folks we've worked with from Laredo. So it's great to be here. We're really appreciative. Going back, it's been 6 years since we have had the ability to speak to the plenary. So we particularly appreciate the leadership of Laredo making this time available for Jan and myself. Go ahead, Jan.
Thank you. And Yolanda will take the next slide there. Great. Well, as I was looking at the Laredo mission juxtaposed with ours, I realized just how much we have in common around support and advocacy for religious educators and religious professionals, professional well-being. Certainly education is a key part of what we do. Equity, more and more looking at our work through a lens of equity. So it is very special to be able to talk to you today with that frame of our common work. I often talk to congregations about being faithful employers, and that means being faithful to the law, and that's a lot of what we do. There are a lot of sometimes annoyingly complex legal pieces that we attend to with respect to worker classification and benefits and payroll. It's also about our values. And so it goes beyond just what you have to do to be compliant with laws. It is how are you operating congregations in a way that's equitable and transparent and truly values all of your staff. So we're pleased to do that work. And again, especially in the context of widening the circle of concern, taking another look at everything we do through that values lens. There's so much we wanted to talk about with you today that we're not. So we could have a huge conversation about how is work valued? How is your pay determined? What are all the things that go into how much people earn? And we're not going to talk about that today, but here's a little placeholder slide, and we'd be glad to talk to your chapter about that, to do a workshop or a retreat with you. So we wanted to just name that that's a huge piece that we continue to grapple with, and we would be glad to have you as partners in that conversation.
And the good news is a fair amount of this information is available on our website.
Absolutely. There are also a number of nuts and bolts issues. One that I answer questions about a lot is exempt or non-exempt status. What does that mean in terms of your pay and requirements for record keeping? Again, not going there, but want you to know that we talk about that and it has an impact on you. One more thing that we are not talking about today is the staffing practices side of my portfolio. So beyond compensation, how are we helping congregations to be great employers, from their hiring practices, supervision, personnel policies? I have a little asterisk next to employment agreements to make sure that I deliver an apology to you right here. We've been saying for a while now that we would have a non-clergy version of our model agreement available. We have one for ministers, and even that one is limited. It's for full-time senior or solo ministers, so it doesn't by any means cover all ministers. We'd like to make model agreements available for part-time ministers, for non-clergy, for various, make various adaptations to the agreement. And that work, we're revisiting the main model agreement, and we want to keep everything in sync. So it's more time consuming than any of us could have predicted, but I'm always glad to talk to you about your own employment agreement and in general work with Laredo on what the needs of Laredo members are. So what are we doing today? Oh, we're going to do some polls. We're going to have fun.
Which led.
Do you want to launch the first poll, Jolanda?
I am working on an issue with my computer, and
Aha.
unfortunately,
Okay.
we
Well,
might have to do
how-
an alternative.
Okay, how about if I read this one and we can like raise hands? How's maybe that'll work.
That would work. Actually, you could do yes. You could do yes or no, and then you can have a count if you want. Say yes or no. Say yes instead of the raising the hand.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
we'll see.
Okay.
Some of the questions have multiple parts, though.
I know.
Okay, first poll. How long has Loretta been involved in advocating for compensation as part of a cross-professional team? So not just within Loretta, but working with ministers and other religious professionals as part of the team to advocate for compensation. And the poll choices are 5 years, 20 years, 32 years, and 44 years. So how many people would think it's 5 years?
Just hit yes, correct. And your green yes in your participant window, and we can count.
There you go. Oh yeah, I could put that question in the chat. I haven't seen very many, but let's, here, I'm gonna put it in the chat. Ready? Oh, look at that, it's up. All right. Wow, this is fun. I don't think I've ever watched a poll with so many people.
And about half the folks have voted. Get your answers in.
Is the poll up, really?
It is, and we're up to 75% voted. We'll give it a few more seconds.
I'm glad y'all see it. So y'all gonna have to cue me to.
Yeah,
it just, I'll figure it out.
It came up just as I was threatening to put it in.
I stumbled upon it and put it up.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Don't ask me how, why, whatever. Technology is not my friend.
Excellent.
Thank you, Richard.
All right, sounds good. Let's end the polling. Let's end the polling.
So.
And share the results. Let's share the results.
A bell-shaped curve, I'd say. This is a bell-shaped curve.
Richard, tell us the right answer and say more about that.
So the answer is 44 years, ding, 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 1976. A group of ministers and a religious educator started talking in the early 70s about collaborating on the issue of compensation and the retirement plan. And Catherine Cronquist of Providence, Rhode Island was the Loretta representative. And they eventually formed what would eventually become the Council on Church Staff Finances in 1976. That has morphed, and several of you have served on that, and so appreciative of your serving on the council. A few years back, we shifted to an advisory team from each of the professional organizations, and which includes all the professional organizations. Membership, musicians, obviously Loretta and the ministers, and subgroups, interim ministry, interim religious educators, and the rest. And currently the representative of Loretta to ACT is Andrew Metz. Go ahead, Jan.
Great. All right, so Loretta, with a very long history of cross-pollinized advocacy. It's fantastic. Let's launch the second poll, and I'll give you a second, Jolanda. Oh, look at that. It's right up there. All right, you need to purchase $40 of supplies at a local store. How do you pay for them? You pay with church funds, you arrange in advance for funds through the church, or you pay out of pocket. Let's see what people are saying. Tim says, oh, I can't wait to see these results. It looks like 80% have voted. We'll give another few seconds here. All right, we're up to 85%. Why don't we go ahead and show the results? All right, there we go. This is actually, Richard, more favorable than I thought in terms of people being able to pay through church funds directly. I was—
Me too.
Yeah, afraid that would be lower. And I'm seeing a couple of comments that it might have been different a year or two back. And I wanted to say something. I put this question in here because I think it's really important to remember that what works for you might not work for everybody. And I know there have been a lot of assumptions. I was thinking about what Gail and Gaia were saying about, you know, money. It is a big deal. And that's not just your pay, but expectations and norms around money in general. And it might be okay for you to put something on a personal credit card, but that might be a burden to somebody else. And so you're in a position where you might, if you're in a position where it doesn't matter to you, maybe you're the person who brings it to the leadership that you don't want to see that be an expectation of staff that they pay out of pocket, right? That's something that you can do to be an ally and an advocate, and to widen the circle so that we're not making assumptions. We don't have biases about how people are able to pay for things. This has come up during the pandemic, people working at home. It might be assumed that you have, whether it's sufficient internet bandwidth or a printer and how much printing you do at home. There are assumptions that get made about people's abilities that are not universal. And if it's something that works for you, again, please consider, will this work for everybody? And I think Kirsten just said something about that a few years ago. So there are many examples of how you can advocate for the health of the larger system and for your teammates and perhaps even for yourself. There might come a time when something doesn't work for you. Better to have had the conversation ahead. All right, we have one more poll. And this one has, I believe, 4 questions. So go ahead and answer all 4 as they apply. So the questions are, if anyone's on the phone, does your congregation participate in the UUA retirement plan? If you don't know, do you commit to finding out as soon as possible? if your congregation is in the UUA retirement plan, do you make voluntary contributions to your account? And if in the retirement plan, do you receive employer contributions? Looks like we're up to 68%. Let's get a few more votes in there and then we will launch the poll.
Kind of like preparing me for election night next week.
Great.
Just to let you guys know, if you're not seeing it in the chat, it's forcing us to answer number 2, even if it doesn't apply.
Oh,
So
sorry.
I don't think you'll get real results on that one.
Thanks.
Didn't think of that. See, I'm learning about Zoom polls every time I try one. We're up to 80%. Let's take a few more seconds and then we'll take a look at the results. All right, let's end polling and launch the results. All right. Does your congregation participate? 86% of you said yes, and another 11% don't know. That sounds about right to me, Richard, based on our knowledge of congregations, how many congregations are in the plan. We'll talk a little more about that. And if you don't know, yep, you're committed to finding out, many of you, and whatever that number means, sorry about that. And if it's in the plan, do you make voluntary contributions? I think we have some education to do on this one, Richard. Richard's going to talk a little about our retirement plan. And do you receive employer contributions? Great. All right, well, we're going to put the slides back up and Richard's going to say just a bit about our retirement plan.
So while we're waiting for the slides to come up or to eliminate the polls, let's see if, there we go, maybe. The UUA retirement plan is a IRS qualified retirement plan, which essentially a church plan, which essentially means, and this is one of the important points that we want to leave you with in general, whether it's about the retirement plan or insurance that we're not talking about today, is that our plan rules and federal law take precedence over congregational personnel policies or decisions. Our plan rules, if you will, trump anything that the congregation does in terms of eligibility. And that's a very, very important point because congregations sometimes narrow eligibility and rewrite the rules essentially illegally. So we're going to go over just a couple of slides about the retirement plan because that's the big message we want to leave you with. One of the big messages we want to leave you with is to make sure that everyone on this call understands eligibility for the retirement plan and for employer benefits. Last time in Baltimore, I was sitting at lunch with 8 or so fellow participants in the Laredo Fall Conference. And I just happened to say, do you mind if I ask the question, how many of you work more than 50% halftime? And the hands went up. And I said, and is everyone with your hand up in the retirement plan? And one person shook their head. And I said, well, are you within a year of starting work? No, 8 years. And so that began a conversation around the fact that this person was owed 7 years of retirement plan contributions, not only for themselves, but for the office administrator who had worked there a year more. for that congregation. So we want to make sure every time I talk to religious educators, or Jan talks to religious educators, or Linda Rose, our retirement plan director, inevitably we find somebody in the room who is not receiving the benefits that legally they must receive. This is not optional. So just a few basics. Our plan has approximately 620 participating congregations. And we figure that's most of the congregations with staff that would be eligible, probably another 50 or so, maybe. But we have most congregations participating. The last time I looked, which was a couple of weeks ago, we had 4,300 plan participants. That includes active folks, retirees, and folks that may have worked and moved on to other employment, but they kept their money in the plan. We have approximately $445 million in our plan, $500 million, which we don't control. You all, the 4,300 plan participants, controls. And our record keeper for the last 10 years, as of the end of this month, beginning of next month, is TIAA. Which is the largest provider of retirement plan services to the nonprofit sector. And we went with them from Fidelity 10 years ago, basically due to mission incompatibility with Fidelity. They basically felt that genocide was okay as long as folks made money. And the UUA disagreed with that. Next slide, please. So we're trying to keep this as simple as possible, but this is complicated. And also, I just want to acknowledge that most congregations do not have anyone on staff who is a paid HR professional, who is used to administering IRS regulated rules that are designed for professionals to regulate. So we've got very well-meaning volunteers, treasurers who come and go, church administrators who may come, may go, who are attempting to administer a very complicated retirement plan, because basically all retirement plans are complicated. So educating folks is really important, which means it's important for you, for religious educators and other professionals, to know what the rules are to make sure that it's being administered correctly, which is why we're doing this. So contribution rules. There are two ways to get money into your account. There's your own money, employee pre-tax money, yay, pre-tax money. And there are employer contributions, which is even a bigger yay, because it's the congregation's money and not your money that's going into the retirement account. So for employee contributions, and this is quite important and is often not administered correctly at the congregational level, all employees, everyone, including a 1 hour a week a babysitter on that is hired, that should be at W-2, when they're hired, should be offered the opportunity to enroll in the retirement plan for purposes of elective employee, your own money, take money out of your paycheck to put into the retirement plans with the hopes that someday you might be able to retire. So from day one of employment, regardless of hours. And this does reduce your taxable income by putting the money into the retirement account. Now we understand there's challenges of setting money aside in terms of, do I set money aside for the future, or do I pay the bills I have today? Important question, but we just want to make sure everyone knows that you can put money aside. So is your congregation telling every new employee and reminding everybody annually that they can make elective contributions? Legally, they're supposed to. Number two, employer contributions. Employers must make employer contributions to all employees who meet the eligibility criteria, which we'll go over in the next slide. Everyone who meets the eligibility criteria must receive an employer contribution. Folks cannot opt out. It is not negotiable. Two, all eligible employees must receive the same base employer contribution and/or match opportunity as specified by the employment agreement that the congregation, the participation agreement the congregation has on file with our office, the Office of Church Staff Finances. So to be blunt, a minister can't get a 10% contribution and everyone else gets 5%, okay? Everyone has to receive the same percentage contribution. Next slide, please. Now, how do you get the employer contributions? There are essentially three ways. One of which is if you've successfully completed a UU ministerial internship. Basically, the hours required for a ministerial internship is equal to the hours that folks would for eligibility for the retirement plan. So if you've completed an internship, you're eligible. Two, previously qualified for employer contributions by working at a participating UU employer. So if you have changed congregations, you've left the UUA, you've gone to a congregation, or you've switched congregations, you were already in our plan, you were receiving employer contributions. From day one of your next employment, you're supposed to get retirement contribution. There's no eligibility waiting period. You've done it once, you don't have to do it a second time. And then the third, for most new people or all new people, you've never worked for a UU congregation or related organization, you're hired, you have to work 12 months, during which you have to have earned worked 1,000 hours. So basically half time for a year, makes you eligible and required contributions on your behalf. And it's 12 months from the date of hire to determine the 12-month period. Did you work 1,000 hours? Now, if you don't work that, if you work, for instance, 980 hours, which it's been known to happen, particularly with religious educators, then that standard shifts to the calendar year in future years. So you would look to see in a calendar year whether you've worked 1,000 hours. And this is very important. Since our restatement in 2014, if you work for multiple UU congregations that are participating in our plan, you can aggregate the hours together. So if you're quarter time here and quarter time there, we consider that half time for eligibility, and then your respective employers have to pay for the employer benefit. And that also includes the insurance plans if your aggregate hours come together. Again, for every new employee, check to see if immediately eligible for employer contributions, and always ask about whether a person has worked for, or you say that you worked for a previous employer and gotten benefits, because then from day one you're eligible. Now, if in fact this applies to you, that you had to wait another year, that you're already in our plan, then talk to Linda Rose and our staff, because your congregation owes you for that year plus any lost earnings. That's a legal process. Next slide, please. And we have one of the greatest resources that we have is the Benefits Tune-Up Workbook. And we happen to have the primary author of that with us today. Jan, would you like to say a word about?
I would say I had the, whoops, hold on. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. I would say I had the vision of it, but this was truly a team effort. Our whole team contributed to what went in this workbook, and it's designed for the leaders in your congregation who work with benefits administration. So often the administrator, the treasurer, but it's certainly the secondary audience is you as staff. You reading this might give you some new insights into things that you are eligible for and haven't been offered, for instance. So we encourage staff themselves to read the Benefits Tune-Up Workbook. It's kind of a step-by-step, what do you need? What documents do you need to have on hand for congregations? Who's eligible for what? What dates do you have to pay attention to? So please take a look at that. We're linking here also to our main benefits, compensation, and aid funds page, and giving you some resources for for TIAA, our retirement plan. Oh, Richard, what's the word? Record keeper. So now I'm excited to share with you something that we made just for you. And I hope it's something that you find kind of fun and cool, because we had fun making it. And we thought, what are some actions, you know, when the rubber hits the road, what can you as a staff member do to help help with your own quality of livelihood, along with helping your teammates and further helping your congregation learn to be a faithful employer? You're helping them build their administrative and HR muscle. So we've put together this challenge for you, and it's going to run for a month starting today. And so there are actions that you can take. Some of them take under a minute. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can share it with somebody on your staff. You can also do things that take a little more time in terms of reading documents, asking your staff for documents that you don't have, signing up for voluntary contributions to the retirement plan. And I'm going to say this again. If your congregation is in our retirement plan, you can make voluntary contributions. It doesn't matter if you're only a few hours a week. It doesn't matter if you only got hired a month ago. You are eligible to fill out an employee contributions form to get those voluntary deferrals started. They'll reduce your taxable income and help you save for the future. So just to make this super fun, we have a log. So you can go in and you can see that Sample Awesome DRE already went in and filled out the first line. So you can go into this log, you can click, you'll get a link to it. We'll make sure all these materials get out to all Laredo members later. And you can go in and mark all the things that you've done. They're neat little drop-down menus. And you can just indicate which stuff you have done, and you can get inspired to move on some of these things that you have not yet done or maybe even thought about. So we hope it's kind of a fun, a little gamified way of getting Laredo members to recognize their agency in their own livelihood and helping their congregations be strong employers. So I'll put up little reminders and progress charts of some kind on the Laredo Facebook group and your Laredo listserv from time to time throughout the month. And we hope it gets filled in and looks really colorful with lots of green and some yellow, and that you really have a good time with it and that you learn something, right? Because this is about education for all of us. So with that said, again, we're excited to work with Laredo. We have a few minutes for questions. Again, we're working together on professional well-being, education, equity, and advocacy. We're pretty easy to find. So please do be in touch with us. And I know a lot went by in the chat.
Hey, Jan, just two things which I think are we should add. One of which is particularly given some staffing cuts that we know is happening in congregations. If your hours are reduced below the 1,000-hour threshold, as long as you are already in our plan receiving employer contributions, if your hours are reduced below 1,000, you still get a retirement contribution at whatever hours you work. So once you're in our plan, even if your hours are reduced, you are always in our plan and eligible and required to receive benefits, even if you went to another congregation and worked less than 1,000 hours. Once you get employer benefits, you are in for the rest of your career within the UUA world. So I just want to make sure folks know that. There are also several questions about open enrollment and mailings going out next week with regards to the health and dental plan for the November open enrollment period. And I'm really pleased to announce, don't tell anyone, I'm really pleased to announce that that the
No, first of all, it's only Kai who was getting tested today. So,
I'm really pleased to announce that there is going to be no base rate increase for the health plan this January. There will be the annual age adjustment, which usually is 1 to 3%, depending upon your age. But the health plan itself is not increasing rates in January. We reserve the right to increase the rates in July, mid-year, for a half a year. But things are so unknown about what effects of COVID will be that we didn't want to raise rates unnecessarily at this time. And nor at the same time can we absorb an entire year of no rate increase if one becomes necessary. So no rate increase in January, and no rate increase for the dental plan either, or life or LTD for that matter. All the premiums are flat if you're already in those plans. Thanks.
Well, I know we got permission to go a couple minutes past 2 o'clock, and I know so much has flown by.
750 hours is the threshold prospectively for any of the insurance plans. If you work 750 hours or more, you need to be offered enrollment in the health, dental, life, and LTD when you're first hired, and life and dental going forward. 750 hours. 1,000 for the retirement plan initially, 750 for the insurance. If you have questions around billing, sending email to insuranceplans@uua.org. No, thank you, Jan. You already beat me to it.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of things like congregations sharing a religious educator or other professional right now. And so some of these little nuances around aggregating hours, this is something that congregations aren't used to. There might be a congregation in a plan who hired somebody for 10 hours a week, had not planned on making contributions to the retirement plan, but they realize they're hiring someone who also has hours at another congregation. And so if those hours combined come out to the 1,000 hours, at some point their eligibility kicks in. So there are some really interesting questions coming out of this time of virtual operations and different kinds of staffing that we're helping with.
The UUA health insurance plan is and all of our insurance plans, for that matter, all of our plans are employment-based plans. So if you have a child who ages out, which happens every year, turns 26, within our plan, the only option is COBRA, which of course is quite pricey. So the Affordable Care Act, of course, is the best option. And of course, we all know the threats that's under at the moment. But COBRA is available until the person is able to find a job that provides health insurance benefits, which the vast majority of Americans do have.
And Richard, can you just clarify, because we are getting older again, people may have heard the message that rates are not increasing on the health plan, but the age adjustment, will that still kick in January 1st?
Correct. So our plan is based on the non-UUA component of our plan is based on your age and on your geography of your residence. So every year, everyone ages. The sad reality is that on average, older folks, and I say that as someone who is 67, older folks cost more money than younger folks generally on average. So our premiums are adjusted as you age. So there's a age component of our annual increase, and then there's the actual base insurance. For instance, nationwide, most health plans are going up at least 5% this year. That's essentially what the Affordable Care Act and most private employers are doing. We're doing 0 in comparison, and it's just the age adjustment, which again is between 1% and 3%.
Great. This has been a treat for us, and we're super excited about this log. So I hope y'all go in and try it and that you learn something. It's not just to make me happy for learning how to do drop-down menus, but actually it's about your learning and supporting your own situations and helping your congregations be great employers. So thank you so much, and we'll turn it back over to.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a real honor to participate in the Loretta. It always is an honor to participate either as a participant or as a presenter, but even more so as a presenter. So don't be shy. You know where to find us. The rest of our staff team is readily available to answer your questions, because Jan and I are generalists, and there are folks that are a lot smarter about details than us. Well, at least me. Jan is smart about everything. And if you're not eligible, if you're not in the retirement plan, please let us know if you think you are, because we'll work with your congregation to make sure you get the money that's owed you.